Thanks very much for your company on another edition of Playmakers here on Sky. Our next guest is a man who needs no introduction. He's the man tasked with sending the Warriors to the grand final. His name is Nathan Brown, head coach of the Vodafone Warriors. Cheers for coming in, mate. Really appreciate it.
No problems.
When you first set out as a rugby league professional and embarked on a near 2-decade coaching career, did you ever think in your wildest dreams that you would be head coach of the Vodafone Warriors?
No, not really. I never I come over a lot as a player and the coach, and but I never got to look around Auckland or New Zealand that time. So basically, I'd only fly in and go to the airport. You'd be in the city at your motel, then come out to Mount Smart Stadium, and then go back to the motel, get up early in the morning, and go home. So I never really got to look around Auckland. So I never really actually, I never thought the place was such a good place. And then when I came here for a few times last year for a week block at a time, and I got to look around, you realise how nice the city it is, you know. So I certainly had no desire to come here from a point of view of as a lifestyle point of view, but once getting here and getting to look around and see what New Zealand's all about, it's actually a beautiful country. So to come here and be coach of the Warriors is obviously a great opportunity for me, my profession, but it's a city where I can quite easily see why people come and like to stay. You know, it is a beautiful place.
Most Australians say it's like coming back to the 1970s.
Well, what it is it's Sydney but much calmer.
Right.
Much. It's got a beautiful harbour. There's plenty of places you can travel which are really nice, but Sydney's obviously sort of on steroids compared to Auckland. That's all. It's just a much bigger version, but I think both places are very pretty and very, both got some beautiful places to, whether it be in Auckland or go and visit and holiday. And as I said, it's just a bit more peaceful than Sydney. Sydney's very, very busy these days.
Mm. As a player and as a coach, what was your perception of the Warriors team? And you played at a time when the Warriors weren't even in the competition. They came in during your playing days.
Yeah, I was sort of started out, the Warriors weren't in, and then they came in. And any team starting out new from another country is always a difficult task for from a starting point. The initial coaches that start in any organisation, any sport, anywhere around the globe, when you're the first head coach of the team, when it's first kicking off, there's a lot of work that needs to be done before a team can become competitive. But the perception of the Warriors, it changes on any given period. Like obviously the Warriors had all the periods where they were building the club and struggling. Then Daniel Anderson come over and Daniel had some really sort of a period of success there where the Warriors were a consistent football team that made a grand final, made the playoffs a couple of years in a row, and were seen as a real force to be reckoned with. Then they died away. Then Ivan took over, and then obviously Ivan had some sort of sustained success there where they played numbers of finals footy and played in the grand final, and then the last sort of 7 or 8 years is probably unfortunate for the Warriors and fans. I think there's only been one semi-final appearance in about 7 or 8 years, which probably, hence I'm sitting here, or some other coach may have still been here if they'd had a little bit more success,
Yeah. Hey, so it's kind of like your second stint, if you like, because obviously last summer you were here in an advisory role to Stephen Kearney. Can you talk us through what that was about? Like how closely were you working with Kearney and the players?
Mainly my job was I was sort of doing a bit of work with the dummy halves, the hookers, and I'd just offer some advice basically to any of the coaches. If I thought I saw something or they were doing something, I'd just sort of give them, I suppose, an outsider's opinion. You probably look at things when you sort of work with people every day and you're around the same people. Sometimes you can, I suppose, all tend to look at the same thing where, I know from my point of view, if I bounce something off someone when I'm a head coach, sometimes there's a different voice or a different idea from someone outside the organisation. So I was basically sort of doing a little bit of that stuff, but obviously the COVID come and all sort of my sort of stuff pretty much pulled up like most consultants did in any activity.
Yeah, but you know what people often think, and you've been around the rugby league game so long, you've probably seen this and heard this many, many times before. Somebody like yourself comes into a club, you've got Stephen Kearney who's under pressure heading into season 2020. People start talking, they start saying that Nathan Brown is obviously here as the replacement. Did you ever get that sense? Is that what was told to you when you arrived as that consultant?
No, I would never have come if that was the case. I was sort of here. Basically, I see any person who works for a football club, their job is to help the head coach stay employed, basically, because you all should be striving for success, Unfortunately, for whatever reason, things didn't work out for Mooks. He's a great person, and as it unfolded, some other people, at the time I wasn't sort of ready to jump back in, but as things unfolded and a few people, knocked the job back, and then obviously different things sort of occurred in my life, and I thought it might be an opportunity that I didn't want to let go. So then we sort of come back into the frame, and fortunately, Robbo and Georgie and Rob Crute thought I was the right person to take the club on its sort of next part of the journey.
Before they got on the blower and they said to you, listen, we want you to be the head coach, what were you planning for yourself? What was going to be your next step?
You don't really know as a coach. That's the thing, and sort of coaching. There's not many jobs really in coaching. You got the NRL jobs as a head coach, and you got England, and England wasn't really an option for me. I sort of already had 6 years there. Not that I would never go back to England, but I'd already had 6 years there, and we're the different stage of life my kids are at, so that wasn't really an option. So, coaching's it's one thing to want to keep coaching, but it's another thing to get an opportunity as well. And so you don't really know where your next opportunity may or may not come from. So as a coach, you've got to be obviously quite open, and you need a very supportive family who are prepared to actually pack up and move it, I suppose, to drop.
And they have.
Yeah, well, they haven't yet, but they will. Yeah, we're movers, but with the situation of where they are, where we sit at the moment with the borders in New Zealand, my family will move out as soon as the borders are friendly. But at the moment, with the team not going to be based here in the new year, it's sort of no good them coming out if I'm not going to be here. So yeah, I'm quite fortunate. My family support my job, and they move with me all the time, otherwise you can't really be a head coach, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose you definitely need that backing, don't you? Yeah. Your predecessor, if I can call him that, Mooks, Stephen Kearney, I think he did most of his coaching stint with the Warriors with his family back in Brisbane. And we know how tough that was.
Extremely difficult, I would have thought. Yeah, I mean, I've only been over for about 7 or 8 weeks now, and the first 2 weeks are good. You don't have to have any real responsibility. And if you want to walk up the road when work's finished and have a bite to eat or have a glass of wine or something, go to the beach and sit on the beach. You can do whatever you like. But after a couple of weeks, you got to think, the other life's a bit better.
Yeah. So you mentioned when COVID hit, the consultancy role, it kind of bit the dust, didn't it? How closely were you watching the Warriors through that time, though? Because, you would have got to know the players and the coaching staff.
Yeah, I always kept watching. I'd talk to... might talk to Morgs or talk to Stacey or Mooks every now and then. So once you sort of start something out as whether you're a full-time coach, part-time coach, once you sort of start, you always have that interest, because you get to know people and, other clubs that I've worked at or other mates that I've worked with. You sort of always, if you're not working, you always have an interest in how they're going. So you tend to watch their games closer than you would watch, any other game. So you sort of still stay quite keenly involved from watching point of view, and I would still, whilst I wasn't really doing the role that I was going to be doing, I'd still have a chat with Morgs or Stace or
so you still kept in touch with the guys?
Yeah, still keep in touch a little bit, because as I said, once you sort of start it out and you start doing a bit of work, coaching is a bit of an addictive type of thing, and we sort of, for whatever reason, we all seem to like it. And as I said, even other mates that might be in the game, got some mates coaching in England, I'd watch their teams. Not that you'd talk to them about it, but you just like to watch, and take a little bit more of an interest in people that you have some.
Why wouldn't you talk to them about it? Are their teams doing poorly or something you don't want to rub it in?
No. Actually, the teams are doing well. One of them won the comp, St Helens, Christian Wolf. So no, it's just, but you just take an extra interest. That's all. Once you have an affiliation with people, it's you always have that little bit of an extra interest.
Did you think that was a bit harsh, given all of the factors that they had to consider in the season of 2020?
Oh, look, from a coach's point of view, I think all coaches, all people that have been head coaches and sort of, myself, like a lot of the guys in the NRL, we sort of see ourselves as career coaches, so we like to be in for a bit of a long haul, and any time we see a coach go down, none of us know anyone that's coached or understands about it. You always feel for the other person, whether you know them or you don't know them, because we all know what it's like, So it's always they're always difficult calls, and they're always ones that sometimes people may agree with, they may not agree with, but the role we sit in, everyone's got an opinion about it, haven't they? That's the thing, So it's sort of a little bit different to the average business where people get about their business and no one really, I suppose, publicly comments. But when it becomes a head coach's job, there's always people that have their opinions, and the great thing with rugby league is we don't all have the same opinion.
Look, we'll set 2020 to one side. Let's look at 2021, your first season as head coach of the Warriors. And let's talk firstly about some of the acquisitions, the playing roster. How happy are you with some of the new guys that have come on board?
Yeah, look, there's been obviously a real plan to bring some bigger people in. The Warriors have had a rather small side for a sort of long period of time. Whilst they might have some big wingers, they've been quite small in the middle part of the field. And so obviously, the development of a couple of younger ones that Mook sort of gave debuts to that played a fair bit of footy last year. And then when you add Aden Fanua-Blake's obviously a top line sort of player in his position. He's sort of one of the top couple in that position. And still was probably still not in his prime of his career. At his age, he's probably still got his best years to come. And Kane Evans is another different type of body shape, and Benny Murdoch's a big guy as well. So obviously there's been a real look to get some bigger, more powerful people into the club, and then you and I can bring some experience in the backs. We have some really good young backs developing that probably aren't quite ready at the moment, that's been sort of in the club for, whether they've been here for 12, 18 months, 2 years, I'm not sure, but they've been here for a number of years, but they're not quite ready to play NRL yet. But, Ewan can provide some good experience there, and he's a really, really good trainer. Young Sirenen's a player who brings a total different dynamic to the other guys that's been recruited. He's obviously nowhere near the same size as those blokes, but he's quite a really good sort of football player, so he plays more of most of his footy in the forwards, but rather than being big and powerful and robust, he's got a bit more subtlety to his game, So, there's been that sort of plan. Then we've brought in Marcelo Montoya, who's he's a younger player who's got a lot of growth in him, but he's sort of played first grade now for a number of years with Canterbury, and Canterbury didn't see a spot for him where we saw a spot for him, and that's that bit about opinions and what different people think of different players. And so it's been some of the recruitment was done before I came in, but obviously when I was talking to Mooks and Peter Sullivan and the staff, you could quite clearly see what the plan was. They had a plan in place. It's just a matter of the right bodies coming up and you being able to purchase them, I suppose.
Yeah, the way the game is changing with set restarts instead of penalties being awarded, and the interchange bench getting reduced year by year, it seems. Having a massive pack like that, do you see it as an advantage or a bit of a hindrance at times?
Oh, well, the biggest pack last year was probably Melbourne, and they won. So it's just sort of it's what type of athletes they are, I suppose, how well they move around, and I suppose what sort of how they can handle the endurance part of the game, and all the guys that have come in from an age point of view have sort of played a fair bit of footy. Kane Evans has been two very good clubs, at the Roosters, and then he went to Parramatta.
So tell me more about Parramatta.
So he's played his fair share of finals footy. So one would think Kane knows his way around the field. And Benny Murdoch was a player who went to England at a rather younger age and really discovered himself over there and learned parts of life in the game that he knew if he did them well he could become a player. So the different players bring different experiences, and Bailey Sirenen's a younger one, who we mentioned before is the small one. So it's just a matter of getting the balance right and getting it work for your club and your group of players, But certainly, good big players who move well are obviously far harder to handle than small ones. That's also, and as I said, the Storm had a rather large pack, and if they weren't the biggest pack, they were near enough to it. And but obviously they're a club that's been very well entrenched in the playoffs for the past 20 years. So they know all about winning. That's for sure.
Yeah, they do. With your roster, how satisfied with it are you in terms of have you got the quality across all the positions you'd like?
Yeah, well, look, I think there's some blokes there that have only in the real, I suppose, early stages of their career. Young Chanel Tavita Harris. He's a very young player. I think he's played about 25 or 30 games. Who will be our halfback next year. So he's sort of spent a bit of time at 5'8", and then sort of when Greeny went over to Newcastle, he sort of got half a dozen games at halfback. So, Chanel's a player who I'm looking forward to working with. I believe could have a good career in that position. Wade Egan's a hooker who, again, he's 40-odd games in, and they've still got their nappies on these blokes, but they got plenty. I believe they've got plenty to work with. Obviously Rogers, a very, very talented player, and Cody Nikorima. He's, again, I thought last year was his best year of footy under Mooks, and then Toddy and the boys that took over from Mooks. I thought it was Cody's sort of most consistent year at 5'8", and again his best years are still coming. You know, so when you're looking at players in key positions, generally sides that don't make the 8 would be not so sure who's going to play where, or they're going to the recruitment market. For us as a club, I feel quite satisfied in key positions that there's, apart from being a little bit of a lack of experience, I suppose, and playing together, there's plenty of potential there. And obviously we've got Carl Lawton who can play hooker and everywhere, you know.
Carl's a bit of an everything man, isn't he?
He's an everything man, you know. Carl, when he played hooker last year, he did a good job. When he played 5'8" or back row, he did a good job, you know. So I feel that part of the thing with the youth and experience is quite handy. Excuse us, right?
It's not COVID. Trust us, it's not COVID. He had the test before he got in the studio.
And then the experienced blokes were brought in have all going to certainly add to the squad. And, you know, blokes that debuted under Mooks last year, Mooks have a sort of fair number of young blokes there, sort of introduction to first grade last year. You know, Jack Murchie, Josh Curran, Jermaine Tanua-Brown, Adam Pompey, like all these blokes all showed some potential, showed they got something to give, but they all need to grow as players, you know, not only, you know, physically, mentally, but the game itself, understanding, you know, what they need to do to become a good first grade player. So that's where your growth comes in those sort of 2 or 3 areas, you know. So, you know, across the board, I think it's an exciting time to take over the squad because, as I said, you know, Mooks over the past sort of 18 months in particular has given a lot of younger guys an opportunity, plus a lot of players have left the club, which give the club the money to bring some players in who can improve your squad, you know. So, you know, generally at different stages in my coach career, I've sort of taken over and the club's been right at the bottom part of the starting of getting it going again, you know. So to come in this time with these blokes already having played and, you know, knowing what first grade's a little bit about and having good players coming into the roster that have, you know, the roster was already, you know, salary cap wise friendly to be able to do that, to, you know, sign a bloke like Adam Fanua-Blake, you know. Not a lot of people get to take over a club and then sign Adam Fanua-Blake, you know. So those things have been, you know, a real promising for the club. And as I said, and for a new coach coming in, you feel quite excited about that.
You mentioned the D word, development, and I suppose that's where another of the club's key acquisitions, Phil Gould, he's going to really help out. But, you know, I suppose Auckland, New Zealand, it's slightly different to, say, Sydney, where you've got a whole wide range of clubs, a lot of people playing rugby league, as opposed to you come to Auckland, New Zealand, you've got a lot of people playing rugby union as opposed to league. So, you know, how do you see and how does Gus see that developmental side of the Warriors work?
Well, I think what you need to do is you need to provide a system in place where these young kids that like union and don't mind league, or like league and like union, you got to provide a pathway for them where they actually can see hope from at a younger age, you know. And the club was sort of well down the track on that already, you know. Before I come on board or Gus come on board, they'd already put an SG ball side in the competition. Last year was the first time the Warriors have had that, which what that does is it allows, you know, your recruitment officer, Peter O'Sullivan, to go to a 16-year-old kid and his parent and say, you know, we'd love you to come to the Warriors and this is the system we've got in place. And they can be happy with that, the coaching, the development of all, and he can play for the Warriors from 16 years of age, you know. So where for many years, or pretty much ever since the Warriors have been in, the Warriors haven't been able to provide that because they didn't have an SG ball team in the competition. As I said, that was already done under Steve and Brian Smith and Peter Sullivan. I'm not sure who come up with the actual idea, but the Warriors over the years have had a lot of good players go to Australia at 16 because they can play for the Roosters, they can play for Parramatta, where they couldn't play for the Warriors. So, you know, the club sort of making advances in those areas really helps your recruitment. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what anyone says, recruitment is the key to everything in not only rugby league, but rugby union. Doesn't matter what the sport is, you know. If you recruit, you know, blokes that move well and have got some, you know, reasonable talent, then it's up to you as a club to put the system in place and the coaches in place, the structure in place to help them grow as people and as players, you know. And if you get those two things right, well, then what you have is you have a lot of talented young players coming through the club. Do you keep them all? No, you don't keep them all, but you don't have to go to the recruitment market all the time. And every time you sack a coach every 2 years, he goes and buys another 7 or 8 players, you know. And the Melbourne Storm and the Roosters, they all just sit back and keep laughing at everyone because they go and buy 1 or 2 players every year and just keep their coaches there and keep on winning, you know. So that's the real key for the Warriors' development. And Gus coming on board, Gus is sort of one of his key things is going to be to get everyone in bed together. Like at the moment, I don't think, from what I understand, Auckland Rugby League and New Zealand Rugby League are separate, and the Warriors, we're separate again. Where if there's some way we can all sort of come together to work for a common cause. Tonga's obviously shown what they can do at the elite level, and the Kiwis have picked up a couple of World Cups, so if we can get Fiji with more players, Samoa with more players, so it's about not only about the Warriors but about the game in general, and obviously, rugby unions, it's like it's religion over here, isn't it? And that'll be like that until we all move on, and then the next generation coming, it'll still be like, and I'm sure that'll be the case, but what a good setup at the lower level will do is it will give young union kids that like both games a pathway and a thing to say, well, I don't mind what the Warriors are doing, so I'm going to have a shot at that, where if they can't play for it at a young age, it makes it extremely difficult to challenge a kid who can play union or league to play league.
Sure does. Look, we're talking a little bit about Phil Gould. What are your experiences with him like previous to this? Have you had much time with him?
Yeah, I played, obviously played plenty of games when Gus coached the Roosters over the years. We used to have some great battles as clubs, the Roosters and Dragons have had some great history and great, we were the first sort of the Anzac games, and so I played against obviously Gus's coach sides. Then I went into the Origin with him. I sort of, when Gus was coaching, I think it might have been nearly the last time he coached an Origin series. Gus, I was in there with him just running the yellow shirt, so I wasn't doing much but running the yellow shirt and babysitting one or two players. that was about me role there then. Yeah, and I've sort of always, we've always known each other, and had the odd conversation. But he's obviously a guy that's got a lot of knowledge on the game, that's been around a long time. There's Gus, Brian Smith, Timmy Sheens, Wayne Bennett. There's some blokes there that have been around for, the best parts of 3-4 generations. So they've been around that long in the game because they've obviously adapted themselves and they can provide good information.
And you guys work pretty well together.
Yeah, good. Well, the stuff we're doing at the moment, like the first grade team and coaching that, is not what Gus is here for. So we're not sort of really working with each other in that way. It's more, Gus is more here to get that sort of system down below really, really well. And his last sort of role in clubland professionally was, if you look at what he did at Penrith, he put that centre of excellence together there and helped lay the foundations which ultimately got Penrith to the grand final. We all spoke about, everyone spoke about the amount of those young kids that played SG ball together, which is what we're talking about here with the ball side. The amount of those players that come through Penrith's ball system and actually played together and then played together in the grand final, and that's how you build your club. You build your club from the bottom up, not the top down.
Yeah. Just lastly on development and recruitment, New Zealand developed a pretty fine hooker, and I'm pretty sure you've got the qualifications to talk about him. Somebody like Brandon Smith, who isn't free for next year, but might be free for the following. How interested would you be in getting Brandon back home to play for the Warriors?
Oh, look, he's an outstanding player. What he brings to any team is outstanding, and he's obviously been playing a different role to the one he would like to play because of he's been playing behind Cameron Smith, and now they've got Harry Grant who's become an Origin player, and so Brandon's probably found himself in the position, what I understand, he desperately wants to play hooker. Whilst he's at the Storm, he doesn't mind juggling his role a little bit or playing the role he is playing, but his next contract is about playing hooker. And whilst he certainly would help any club, we've already got Wade Egan on contract too. I've certainly got a lot of confidence that Wade can be a 10-year player for the Warriors, and you need to be careful that you don't know the best yard to look into your own backyard first. And Wade's here and he's with us, and as I said, we've got got high expectations of Wade to be a good long-term player for the Warriors.
What about Matt Lodge? Sort of getting away from your specialist position, but there have been a few murmurs, a few whispers around the possibility of acquiring Matt Lodge. How far down the road are we with that?
No, we haven't spoken to Lodge. It's sort of more come because the club were interested in Lodge last year, but he re-signed with the Broncos, and then obviously, Peter O'Sullivan's his father-in-law, and obviously there's relationships, so it's always an easy way to just assume that may happen. Matt Lodge is a player. Matt Lodge had extreme bad luck last year with injuries, so he never really got on the field. And the one or two games he did play, he actually wasn't in the position to put his best foot forward because he had a really bad knee, But Matt Lodge, his body holds up well and gets himself in good shape again. He'll be an outstanding acquisition for a side if the Broncos decide to I suppose, give him some money to move on to another club. But we haven't been down that path because we've signed Adam for Noah Blake. But Matt Lodge would be an outstanding signing for any club if his body can allow him to do the things that I know he could do.
Perception is reality is one of these catchphrases that gets bandied about all over the place.
Yeah.
With Matt, do you have to also consider what has happened in his past before signing somebody like him?
Yeah, look,
because you know what fans and people will think.
Yeah, I suppose the best way to answer those questions is that I suppose we've all probably got, if not a family member, we've all got a cousin or an associate who we know when they took drugs and drank alcohol, let's say they didn't behave very well. We've also seen those people grow up and not do it and become good people. We've seen others not grow up and just be idiots for their whole life. You know, Matt Lodge, fortunately, you know, that incident he had was obviously a bad incident, but it was the making of him as the person. He's now a husband, a father, and a good person. So sometimes, you know, it's those things are things that certainly need to be looked at. But I think, you know, there's been plenty of people in rugby league and world sport that have had bad off-field behaviour as a younger person and then had children and matured and become good people. So sometimes we need to sort of, you not forget the past, but judge them on how they are now today, not what they were like.
Well said. 2021, it's shaping as a similar challenge to what 2020 was in terms of the Warriors domiciling in Australia and for, I hope it doesn't happen, but for long periods of time, right? That's the reality that you face. So who advises you, who are you looking to talk to about the challenges that lie ahead?
Oh, look, the club would have, you know, any time you do something the first time, you gain great experience, don't you? It doesn't matter how intelligent you are or how well you do get it, but get something right and wrong. But the first time you do something, there's a lot of experiences to gain, good ones and not so good ones. That's just life, and that's how we all learn and how we all get better. And, you know, two of the things that, you know, probably the things that were hardest for the Warriors boys last year and staff were families, and obviously a lot of families end up getting there, some didn't, so some players come home, and uncertainty. So the two things that, you know, I suppose that Rob Crute and Cameron George, you know, probably worked out after talking about different things was the two things we need to sort of create for the club and the team to give the best chance, I suppose, was let's get rid of the uncertainty. And obviously the families with the borders in being friendly in Australia, that takes away the family problem. So what we've sort of done is we've just put some plans in place where we're sort of locked into Australia for the first 4 rounds, so our first 2 games will be back there, and our plan is to come home and obviously live and play here from round 5 on, and that gives the players with children, they can lock their kids into a school term, and then if the borders aren't still open by the time round 4 starts to appear, well then we'll lock in for another school term, and we'll just keep doing that. So then, you know, the players are comfortable. You know, the players certainly enjoyed the places they went to last year. They enjoyed their sort of isolation out in Tamworth, so we've gone back there. We're there for a month though this time, so the players really enjoyed being there, and Tamworth enjoyed having the players. And then, you know, they all love being at the Central Coast. There's a lot of worse places to live than across the road on the beach at Terrigal. And, you know, and off the back of that, you know, we can have some facilities this year where we can sort of have a bit of a base, where last year the boys are a bit like gypsies and nomads moving around a lot. You know, we can sort of, once we get to the Central Coast, we've sort of got a bit of a training base and some offices there that'll be there, so that at least we've sort of got a base to work out of. And again, the boys seem to enjoy playing out of the stadium there last year at Blue Tongue. So, you know, it's not, you got to try and turn these things into like a positive. That's what you need to. And I sort of see, you know, we've had the first part of the year apart, so that was certainly the best option for us as a club, because it didn't want to have to make people isolate again, so that would have been taking too much training time out of them. So being apart has allowed us to have smaller groups, work with a lot of the younger players in particular on the core skill parts of the game, and obviously physically, so they sort of probably got a little bit more, I suppose, coaching, because you had smaller groups when you had staff in Australia and staff here, which enabled that to work. It took a little bit of managing, but we make that work. And then we get a month sort of long footy camp, I suppose, in Tamworth, where we're just sort of doing footy for a whole month. There'll be a bit of a break in between, but so we've got to make that work for the best suit us, and that's what you need to do in these situations. Work out ways where you feel you can get an advantage as opposed to sit around and whinge at it being a bit of a disadvantage, So that's how we've sort of taken the approach, and it's certainly, we're sort of reasonably happy with how the younger blokes are developing at this end, and most of the experienced blokes are actually in Oz at this stage, so most of our experienced players, so they've all just recently returned to train over the past sort of 2 or 3 weeks. So again, the younger players that sort of started to make their sort of mark in first grade last year, they come back quite early and had a fair bit of one-on-one time with the coaches, and then as the sort of years sort of gone on, a few of the more experienced and new signings have slowly sort of filtered into the squad.
How easy is it to keep an eye on the guys in Australia? And who are your eyes and ears on the ground over there?
Well, you've got to rely on your staff. So you got to, you need good staff anyway. Whether you're all together or not, you need good staff. And I believe we've got a very experienced staff out there. Morgs has been coaching for a long time. Craig Hodges, one of the new coaches, has been coaching for 20 odd years, and the strength conditioner bumper, he's been doing it for 20 odd years as well. So there's a lot of experience there. We were fortunate to get a doctor who's got a lot of experience, who's down at Kiama, so has worked in rugby league for a lot of years, and we got a couple of physios who've got a lot of experience in rugby league as well. So we fortunate we had to get people with experience, to make it work, and fortunately that sort of worked out well for us. And from a watching point of view, with the drones and all the technology these days, it's not too hard to get footage put on your computer and watch it. It's nothing like being there, but you can still keep an eye on it a little bit.
Performance-wise for next year, like Warriors fans, you mentioned it earlier, Nathan, they've sort of been out of the playoffs mix for a long, long time. It was 7 years. 2018, they finally got back, and then a couple of years out of the mix. What are your expectations for this playing squad? Just making the 8? Do they need to make the top 4? How far do you think they can go?
Well, I can't sit in now and tell you how they'll go. I'm excited to coach the squad we have. That's what I can tell you. One. Two, the development of some of these younger players will be the key to the Warriors' next 3 or 4 years. The development of Chanel Tavita-Harris, the development of Wade Egan, Jack Murchie, all these younger players who have started to play and sort of make a bit of a mark in first grade in the past 2 years. Their development as players is going to play a fair part in where the club gets to. And we saw Penrith last year come in, and people weren't saying anything about Penrith at all, were they? And all of a sudden they won a premiers. Now, I'm not sitting here saying it's going to be the Warriors, but clubs can change rather quickly through some of your own good young players developing and 2 or 3 good recruitment decisions. Now, we've just spoke about our recruitment. We're all quite excited by what we've brought in, but again, what happens with that development of those younger players will have a huge impact on where we get to. And at the moment, the clubs are parted at the moment, so by the end of sort of Tamworth, after a month in Tamworth, we'll get a good feel where we're at as a squad. But I'm certainly excited to be working with this squad. I've worked with far worse squads over the journey before, and I've worked with squads that were more ready as well. So it's a really exciting challenge. And my whole goal is, first of all, you want any football club you work at to be a side that consistently makes the playoffs, because when you consistently make the playoffs, then you put yourself in a situation where you can win a grand final. And we was talking about the Melbourne Storm earlier. They consistently are there, and they pick up a grand final. And the great example in the past sort of 5 or 6 years was probably the Cronulla Sharks and North Queensland Cowboys. Both clubs had never won a premiership, but both clubs became consistent semi-final teams for 5 or 6 years, and both picked up their first grand final along the way. And myself, like probably Looks and like Ivan Cleary and like many of the coaches have been here, I'd ideally love to be the first coach to win a grand final with the Warriors. That would be a personal goal, but there's been plenty of people that have probably sat here interviewed by you that was their personal goal as well. If that makes sense.
I haven't done that many interviews, Nathan, actually, but you're my first.
Oh, there we go.
So I wish you luck.
Yeah.
Listen, what about your own KPIs for the next season? Like, how would you judge your own success? Forget about like what the team does.
Oh, look, I probably answered that question a little bit before. How these younger blokes develop, that's obviously going to be a fair part of it. And when I say that's not my own KPI, that's myself and the staff. There's no head coach out there that's got any magic wands. Everyone has good staffs these days, or you can't. It's too big a task, with the amount of players you have, and how we get the more experienced and new players to bet into the club. There's 2 really good challenges to start with, and if we can, we get some good growth out of the younger ones, and we get the new signings to sort of merge into the squad quite well in what will be probably a short preparation due to being separated at the minute. Where that takes us, and then we could see what would be successful or not successful.
When the Warriors coach gets sacked or they walk or whatever, fans usually go, all right, well, let's chuck the checkbook at, I don't know, Wayne Bennett. Oh, he's not available. Let's get Craig Bellamy. Yeah. And when that doesn't work out, they're like scratching their heads, and then somebody's appointed, and I don't know, maybe they're not good enough in the eyes of some fans. So to those people, tell them right now, why are you the best man for the job?
I've got a lot of experience, I suppose. I've been head coach for 20 years now, whilst I'm young in coaching age. I suppose at 47, I'm probably not that old for a head coach, but I've been...
Can't believe you're 47.
I've been doing
like
it.
You're about 32.
I've been doing it for a long time, and so this is my 5th job. So I feel, the more you do coaching, the better you generally get at it. That's how I feel, So I feel my better years are coming, and generally every club I've been to has been better for me being there. We didn't win it all of them. I won a grand final in England. I lost the grand final in England, and at the Dragons we come close a couple of times. But I felt every time I left the club was in a far better position than it was when I got there. But look, this challenges all the challenges you get at different clubs are generally different challenges. This is being the head coach of a team in a country is certainly extremely different challenge, isn't it? Where there's one team in the country on rugby league team and you're in charge. That presents its expectation alone.
Bit of pressure.
Yeah, which is good though, because as coaches, the one thing we all don't mind is the pressure and the expectation, else we wouldn't do the job. Mm.
You're only as good as your last performance. I'm wheeling out a lot of cliches here, aren't I?
You've got the best you have, mate.
Cliche king, yeah. So when you're announced as the Warriors head coach, people probably go on Wikipedia or whatever and they go, okay, Nathan Brown, let's find out a little bit about him. He coached the Dragons, he's been coaching for a long time, went to the UK, had some success with St Helens, Newcastle Knights. Oh, what happened there? Are we getting the Nathan Brown from the Newcastle Knights, or are we getting the Nathan Brown who had success in the UK Super League?
Well, as I said, the challenge is very, very different. And the one we took on at Newcastle is far, far different to this one. And things were sort of tracking along they were tracking slowly at Newcastle. But that was the approach that we had to sort of take at the time, and we were certainly slowly moving our way forward. And as a club, and then things happened, and then we move on. But again, Newcastle's far better for me going there, because they never had Kalen Ponga and Mitchell Pearce and Origin front rowers before I got there, So that's one thing I can guarantee, is that generally wherever I've been, it's been better. But as I said, the challenges are so different, and Newcastle was a very difficult challenge at times, but very enjoyable as well. But you move on, and sometimes for whatever reason things don't quite work out between the coach and a club at different stages for whatever reason. Sometimes it's all the coach's fault. Sometimes something just doesn't work out. But I've seen many coaches go from club 1 to club 2, and then the results are a lot different. And sometimes that just needs. Sometimes you find you find the club that seems to work for you.
I don't expect you to unearth everything that happened in Newcastle, but can you sort of pinpoint a few things as to what made that night's experience so difficult?
Look, I never spoke about it since I've left. I'm not going to start talking about it now. It's not something that I really want to talk about, but I got some great experiences out of it. I got some good lessons, some good life lessons, things away from footy as well. But we loved our time there as a family, and I enjoyed my coaching time there. Just the last little period wasn't great, but it was before that. There was, I can look at the last 5 or 6 weeks, or I can look at the first 3.5 years. And the first 3.5 years was hard, because of where we were as a club, but it was also rewarding watching. The club slowly grow and attract people like Kalen Ponga and then Daniel Safidi play Origin, So to see some of those things gives you some really good memories. But when you finish the way I finished, there was a different finish, let's say that.
Yeah. You sat here as a 47-year-old with nearly 2 decades worth of experience as a head coach, which seems crazy. You started your journey in this capacity as a 29-year-old. That's incredibly young, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty young, from what they tell me. Young and stupid sometimes we are. We've got some great experiences there, so we certainly I certainly don't encourage young coaches to do what I did, because it's coaching's about getting experience. I always, if any sort of younger coach talks to me, I always encourage them to take their time, go and work for a number of coaches, work for a number of clubs, and really gain your experiences and make your mistakes a bit out of the limelight. And then when you get there, make sure you're ready, because coaching's probably a lot more difficult now than when I first started, because you got all these different shows that are on, and there's a lot more probably, I suppose, pressure comes from social media, from media, than what did when I was a younger coach. And when I was in England, Alex Ferguson was still the Man United coach, and he finished up. I think it was either my last year I was in England or my second last year. And when he finished up as a coach, he said if he started today, he wouldn't have lasted 2 years. He would have got the sack by Man United. So that's how the social media and all these different football shows and that have probably changed the landscape. Because the negative publicity can put certain people at certain clubs under pressure. And if they don't hold their nerves, Sir Alex Ferguson, from what he said, he would never have done what he did. So it can be much more difficult now for a coach to start out than what it was when I first started.
Yeah. Do you think it was? So it was a case of maybe too young, too early for you?
Oh, look, it's just about experience. I enjoyed my time, and I don't regret doing what I did at the Dragons. We developed had some good younger players, and we had some good experienced players that were already there when I took over. So, and we come close a number of times. We finished the game short of the grand final on a number of occasions, and made the playoffs most of the time. But I know that as a younger coach, I know the things that I got wrong. But you don't know until you actually do it sometimes, So that's why I say you're best off doing it in an environment like in reserve grade, or doing it in under 20s, or being a part and learning from a good experienced coach, Because, as I said, coaching's about experience, and the more experience you get, the better you get at it. And when you're very, very young, there's a lot of experience in life that you haven't had, whether not only be coaching, but being a parent, all sorts of different things. So it's as a coach, you need to be able to, more than coach the players, you need to be able to help them in some other areas as well, or at least provide a bit of guidance from them. So I don't regret coaching at 29, but I certainly got some great lessons, that's for sure.
Yeah. Was it also kind of hard to separate Nathan Brown, the player, and Nathan Brown, the coach? Because you're now coaching a lot of the guys that you played alongside.
Yeah, no, it's tough. Yeah, anyone that does that, I'll tell you, it's not the smartest thing to do. Different if it's one or two players, but to coach a heap of players to play with, it's not the smartest decision for anyone to do. No.
Do you want to talk about Trent Barrett at all?
Well, we'll be coaching against Baz again this year, so no, we get on fine, me and Baz. Yeah, we get on fine, me and Baz. When we see each other, we always have a good chat and a chuckle.
The Trent Barrett episode, you're on the sideline with the lads, and the slap occurs, and all of the media get involved. The fans, I believe, in the stands were kind of egging you on once you sort of like got the finger in the chest and all that sort of stuff. Like, what was going through your mind on that occasion?
I've coached that many games of footy since then, I can't even remember now. But all that is, I got a great lesson out of it, didn't I? It was an expensive slap, one. And
what was it, 5K?
And that was about 10K.
10,
yeah,
jeez.
But it's just I shouldn't have put myself in that situation. That's all. As I said, it's not even something that's ever crossed my mind before, or will never cross my mind again. But as I said, these are the experiences we gain out of being a very, very young coach. I'm not the first one to do it. I certainly won't be the last, but it was one of those things I'd rather didn't happen, but it did, and you just got to live with it, don't you? Especially these days with social media, you can't get away from anything.
Exactly. That's why the Mad Butcher Lounge is no longer a thing, because of social media and people on smartphones.
Yeah.
You ruined it. That's what you've done. Anyway, enough from me on that. What kind of coach are you now then? Because you've had all this experience. Are you a Craig Bellamy type where you're kicking chairs and
you got to be who you are.
Saliva and
no good trying to be someone else. You learn that as a coach. You got to have you got to believe in what you're doing, and believe in your own skin. You got to back yourself. No good worrying how other people do it, because everyone's so different, aren't they? And, look how successful Bellyache is and Trent Robinson, and they go about their business rather differently. And then you got Wayne, who's got his own unique style which is way different to anyone coaching today, but still successful. But what you got to do is you got to back who you are and believe it can work.
Was there any one or two coaches while you were playing that maybe moulded the coach that you are, influenced you possibly?
Not really, because I started so young. So I was fortunate to have some very good coaches at St George. Brian Smith was a great coach, and David Waite was a good coach, and Maxi Ninnis was an old guy who took me to St George. He was a good mentor for me, as he was. And Maxi was good for behind the scenes for Brian Smith and David Wade as well. You know, so Max provided plenty of stuff, and then you just learn through different experiences, don't you? That's as I keep saying, you know, it's the great thing with coaching. The more you do it, the better you'd like to think you get at it.
Put your analyst hat on. You don't need to take that one off. Let's talk about the other 15 teams in the competition next year. Do you see the power base shifting at all, or do you think it's just going to be the same again?
Oh, look, there's always, you know, one or two teams that didn't make the 8 that are going to bubble up, you know, and you'd always like to think if you're working for them, then you're going to be one of them, don't you? So there's generally one or two that'll bubble up, and you know, but you know, the sides that have been consistently up there for the past sort of, you know, 6-8 years of, you know, the Storm's been consistently there, the Roosters have been consistently there. South Sydney's been in, I think they've been in 6 or 7 prelim grand finals in the last 9 years, you know, so they've finished a game short of the grand final the last 3 years in a row, you know, so you don't see a real reason why those sides aren't going to keep being hard to beat, you know, and the challenge for the sides that aren't in the 8 is to recruit well, and 2, develop your own players well, so you can push yourself up there, because that's the only way you get there. It's, at the end of the day, you know, all the coaches that are up there will tell you they've got some pretty settled squads. So to get a settled squad and hopefully get some consistency out of it, that's how you climb yourself back up.
What about the Titans? I mean, they've secured for themselves some pretty big boys in that pack. For Fifita, for Asua Maliawi.
Yeah, they've made some terrific signings, you know, yeah. Herman Esiesi's there as well. And, you know, I believe that they keep saying Brandon Smith's a possibility of going there at some stage. So, look, they're recruiting very well, and again, I think, you know, they're putting some focus into their junior development as well, you know, which is, until you get that junior bit right, you're not going to probably trouble Roosters and those sort of Melbourne Storms. You know, you can't be buying players every year, or you're not going to be getting to where you get. You've got to develop your own players, and when you do go to the market, you're only going there for limited numbers of players, you know, so it makes your recruitment far easier.
Are we going to see the Broncos bounce back under Walters?
Oh, look, all these things are questions that none of us can really answer until we start playing. That's the thing, you know, like, we can all talk that we're going to be doing this better, and, you know, pretty much if you did an interview with every side that missed the 8, all the players would be telling you how great the new coach is going, and yeah, it's just, we see it every year, you know, we're going great, we're doing this is much better than last year, blah, blah, blah. Heard it all, we're fitter, we're faster, we're stronger. Until people actually start playing, you just don't know how it's going to be, you know, so, you know, you can, after sort of round 6 or 8, you'll get a feel for what sides have really improved, what sides have got worse, and what sides that missed the 8 last year are going to miss the 8 again. And, you know, last year we looked at Penrith, you know, when Penrith first started playing, it was like, you know, are they going to keep going, or are they going to stop? But then after 8 or 10 weeks, they appeared to be a side that everyone started to say, I think these blokes are...
They're the real deal.
Well, they're going to be hard to beat, you know.
Yeah.
So you can't really tell 8 to 10 weeks. You know, we can talk about changes of coaches, new recruitment, new strength in the end. We've seen it for years. Until you actually start playing, that's where the proof is.
When we start playing, the Warriors that is, oh man, are we going to see them play at Mount Smart? I know that the first 4 weeks you're away in Australia, and there's talk of vaccines and possible travel bubbles with New Zealand and Australia. Do you see it on the menu for Warriors fans?
I've tried to answer the questions that I may know something about.
Are you not across the vaccines and travel bubbles?
No, I'm not across
Oh,
that.
okay.
Yeah. I can make up a story if you want.
Yeah, go on.
Make one up if you like.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, we'll be back
Please
for
do.
round 5 there.
Oh, fantastic. We've got it in stone.
Yeah.
Round 5, Mount Smart Stadium. Actually, if that happens at all, whether it's round 5 or round 25, there won't be enough temporary seating in the country, will there, to get enough people into that stadium? How will we accommodate all those folk who are desperate to see the Warriors play at home?
Well, what you want is you want them desperate to see the Warriors play at home, but we want them to be coming to watch a team that's playing well too. You know, not just because they've been starved of footy. You want them to hopefully be coming because the team's, you know, doing a pretty decent sort of job as well.
Yeah. How heavily have you sort of invested in the move? Like, do you buy a house in New Zealand? Do you rent for a bit? What's the go there?
At the moment we can't because the team's not here. So, but once the team gets here, we'll sort of work our way through that. But it's certainly a lovely place, and a place that I could quite easily live for a long time if work permitted. Yeah.
Where are you staying at the minute?
I'm staying at Parnell at the minute.
Oh, very lovely.
Yeah.
Looking to extend to where possibly?
I really like it out at Mission Bay and out that way.
By the beach.
Yeah, it's sort
water.
of like I sort of grew up on the coast myself, so
Yeah.
I've spent most of my life on the coast. But yeah, so it seems nice and relaxing out there. It's not
Because
too far away.
you're a keen surfer, aren't you?
I was till I hurt my neck playing footy, so I had to give it away. But I still like going to the beach though.
Get out on a stand-up paddle board.
I
perhaps?
haven't, but I could do. But I just enjoy going anyway and just having a swim. And most of my kids like going as well. So.
What are you looking forward to most about spending a lot of time in New Zealand? Is it to get to know the culture a bit, get around a few places that you've heard of and never had a chance to get to?
Oh, probably all of the above. Yeah, like we've sort of moved around a fair bit with coaching, and certainly the best way to do it and best way to sort of learn and mix with people is invest in the way they live. And we certainly had some great times in the north of England, then we went to Lancashire and then another part of England, which was great, and then we went to Newcastle, which was, it's a great family experience in Newcastle as well. So if you sort of invest some of your time into the people, you generally sort of get it a little bit back.
All right, Nathan, I've taken up too much of your time already, but one last thing, complete this sentence. In 2021, the New Zealand Warriors will
Be consistent.
be consistent.
That's what we'd like.
All right. I look forward to seeing it, mate. Nathan, thank you so much for spending so much time here on Playmakers. I do appreciate it a lot.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.